video work logs. This is going to be an extra video in the series detailing how we achieve some of the painting and weathering effects on this case. I've had a lot of requests over the last couple months if I can put together a video or two exactly showing how we achieve some of those painting effects. So today what we're going to talk about is color theory and design, color composition, primary, secondary, and tertiary colors, and complementary colors. All these things are going to be important for you guys to know to achieve a realistic painting effect. So let's just dive into our project guide now, and I'll show you what we got planned for today. Alright, looking down on our project here, you can see we got a lot ahead of us. Got a lot of painting to do. Everything in the white and the light gray is going to be painted. What we're going to work on is this kind of rust and weathered effect, and the way that we're going to achieve that is using multiple layers of light coats of rust and German gray, and then we're going to finish it up with a dry brush finish and a couple other painting techniques. But our first and most important coat is going to be our primer coat. And if you guys don't have an airbrush, I like to spray all my primer through airbrush. But if you guys don't have an airbrush, there's a couple products out there on the market that I really do recommend. And the first is the Rust-Oleum Automobile Primer. It's wet sandable. You can use this pretty much on almost any surface. It works great on polystyrene plastic. And the second is the Krylon. The Krylon is not as great as the Rust-Oleum, but it'll do the job as well. The trick when using spray can primers is make sure your cans are primed well. You shake them up and discharge any chemicals through the cap. And then when you spray your primer, don't just start haphazardly just spraying everywhere. You want to have a consistent control. You want to spray, either up and down or left to right. Don't do both, because you're going to get a lot of drips and runs in your paint. So what I like to do is, if I'm using a spray can primer, is you want to start from about 2 to 3 inches away from the piece, and then work 2 or 3 inches past the piece. What I mean by that is you don't just start and just spray right on the piece, because you're just going to get drips. You want to start over here, spray, stop, start over here, spray, and stop. It's all in the wrist. It's a good wrist action thing. You just spray, and you'll get a really good professional finish that way. So let's just go ahead and just lay down our first primer coat, and I'll just pass mine through my airbrush because I prefer to do it that way. And then we'll just start building up our layers of our primer coat, and then we can start adding the first color coat to this piece. Alright, I've got my primer loaded into my airbrush. The primer that I'm using is just Tamiya primer. You can get it at any local hobby store. I prefer to blow everything through my airbrush rather than using the spray can primers. I just get a better control over my paint consistency and airflow this way. The airbrush that I'm using is an Iwata HPCS. It's a dual action brush. This thing that you've probably seen in the earlier videos is a moisture filter. You get a lot of condensation that builds up in your lines, and if you get too much, it'll end up making its way through your airbrush and spraying out the end and spraying water all over your piece and destroying your paint job. So what this does is just traps any moisture in the line, and that way it doesn't make its way through my airbrush. It's probably about a $30 part, but it's probably one of the best lifesaver pieces that I've purchased for my airbrush. So let's just go ahead and just start spraying down our primer. We're going to use the same technique that I told you about, how we use with our with any rattle can. You want to start from work from the left to the right or up and down. You don't want to do both. You want to just work in consistent flow. That way you don't get any drips or any runs in your paint. So let's just go ahead and just get started laying down this first coat of primer coat. Alright, we're just going to start with our little generator tower here. As you can see, I don't have any pieces glued down yet. All these pieces are still just lightly attached here. That way I can just spray these pieces on every side before I actually glue them down to the final piece. And this gives me better control this way of working with the piece, and that way I'm not spraying all the way behind here and missing some areas. So what I do is I like to get some of these old skewers here, these little bamboo skewers from the supermarket, and it gives me a good platform just to spray all the way around here without actually touching my piece and getting fingerprints all over it. So let's just go ahead and start spraying our first coat of primer on here. Alright, we got our primer installed here. The next step is to add a little bit of shading, and the way that we're going to do that, we're going to mix up a little bit of the German gray and a little bit of flat black and start adding in all those little creases in there just to give it a little bit of depth and kind of a little bit of a weather effect. So let's go ahead and mix up that color, and I'll show you how to do it and how to apply that effect. Alright guys, we're going to begin laying down our shadow effect now. And the way that we're going to create that color is we're going to use about 2 or 3 parts of our flat black here, along with probably about 1.5, maybe 2 parts of our German gray. And the reason we want to get that color down now first is because we're going to add several other paint layer colors right over the top of that shadow effect. And wherever that paint didn't land, that darker color is just going to shine through and give us a realistic weathering effect. Kind of like what you see up here in the side panel that we built a little bit earlier. You kind of see the darker areas right there. That's the shadow effect that we created. And then we just went right over the top of that with a little bit of the rust color and a little bit of the buff color. And we'll do that as well down here on all these primered pieces as well. So let's go ahead and get started laying down that shadow effect. Alright, taking a look at the colors that we're going to use for our base color here. I just got a little bit of the flat black. We're just going to use just hardly any of this, just a touch, just to change the tone of the rust a little bit. And then, of course, our German gray, and then our rust mixture. This is just a product by Model Masters. It's an acrylic paint as well, and this comes in the rust color. And I already got the color mixed up here. And what you want to do is, let's see if I can get some better light on that for you. You kind of see it in there. It's kind of has a nice rust base to it. This is about 3 parts rust and about 1 touch of the German gray and just a touch of the black. And that's just going to be our mixture that we're going to start laying right over our piece, just to add some nice rust and grime areas and some of those crevices as well. So let's get this loaded into our brush and start spraying it on. Alright, so with that rust mixture, what the idea is, we're just going to start laying it down kind of in the same idea that we laid down the shadowing color here. We're just going to start laying it around the bases here where rust would just kind of gather naturally, kind of where water would just build up, kind of like around all the little flat edges. Around the little rims here, maybe on the side and some of this little V grooving, down along the bottom of this edging here. Just anywhere you think water would and rust effect would gather naturally. So let's just go ahead and start spraying that on right now. Alright, and for this procedure, I want to remove one of the cones on my airbrush. That way I can get a little bit of a finer line on my spray. And the way we do that, we just remove this end nozzle right here, and that'll just reveal the needle there coming out the end, which will give us a little bit of a finer spray. Alright, now just lay this down. We're just going to hold this back from our piece about 3 to 6 inches, just depending on how big of a line that we want to spray, and just start spraying it on in kind of just little random patterns. Alright, as you can see here, we got that rust mixture kind of just laid over into some spots on here. Like I said, this is just a top coat, and what we'll be doing a little bit later, we'll be adding some grease marks and a little bit more rust mixture to the top of that, just to give it some deeper tones to it, just to make it a little bit more realistic. So right now we got our primer coat, we got our shadow coat, and we got our first layer of weathering effect. And with those 3 colors, it's looking pretty realistic at this point. Pretty happy with how it's turning out. So let's go on to our next color, which is a little bit of the oil finish to give this some oil stains and a little bit of a grime look to it. Alright, so the next color that we'll be adding is a little bit of that darker rust mixture. And what I'm mixing up here is a little bit of the rust with just a touch more black to it. And this is just going to give us the foundation of kind of the wetness of our water stains and our rust stains. And then over the top of this, we'll put liquid smoke that kind of has an oil sheen to it, just to give it a little bit more realism. So let's go ahead and get this loaded into our brush, get this thinned out a little bit with a little bit of thinner, and start spraying it on. Alright, so what we want to do is we want to start spraying it in all these little rivet holes here that you can kind of see right there. And that darker mixture is kind of going to give a nice kind of weathered, wet look, kind of where the water and rust is kind of stained the area. So we'll just start spraying in all these little holes, kind of make it a little, dribble out a little bit, just give it a little bit of realism to it. So let's start spraying that on. Alright, I just kind of finished up that effect, kind of get the idea here. We just kind of sprayed all over in those little rivet holes. Just to give the simulation of where the water is kind of gathered in those areas, and just rust it up a little bit more. And what we'll do right now is go ahead and mix up a little bit more of just the rust color, and just start making the rust kind of just drip out of those holes a little bit. And we'll use our paintbrush for that effect. And then we'll go right over the top of that with our liquid smoke, which will give it a little bit of a wet sheen to it. Kind of just a little bit of gloss, kind of simulate wet steel or wet concrete or whatever. But we'll achieve this effect across our entire front piece that we constructed, and do a dry brush finish, and we'll call that part of the weathering effect complete. It's a pretty simple effect to achieve, pretty realistic with very few applications. So let's go ahead and finish this up, and I'll show you how to achieve that kind of gloss wet look as well. Alright, the next step is we need to start working on some of these little water and rust stains here. And the way that we achieve that is we mix up a little bit of the liquid smoke and a little bit of the rust mixture, and start spraying in all the little rivet holes along the front panel of the case. And just kind of spray right in those holes, and then we kind of just spray downwards a little bit and just kind of simulate those little watermarks. So let's go ahead and get started doing that.